And yes, welcome to this webinar on advanced telehealth for musculoskeletal assessment and treatment. My name's Peter Simpson-Young. I'm one of the CoView team here. Originally studied psychology and neuroscience and philosophy at Sydney Uni because I was obsessed with brains, and then I became obsessed with brain tech, so I studied a Master of Health Technology Innovation. And actually, I've been using CoView myself since 2016, back when it was a project at CSIRO, so long-time fan. Who I joined quite recently. A bit of a fun fact, before I was here, I worked at a company called Ability Made, which is another at least health startup. And we did a digital scanner for lower limb and 3D printed ankle foot orthoses. So I feel like that's relevant. Today we have an amazing lineup. We've got Karen Finnan, who's the Director of Online Physio, who's going to be telling us, knows the gold standard on how to deliver telehealth for physiotherapy, and will sharing some of those insights with us. I've got Dr. Peter Edwards from Curtin University, who's leading an incredible research project at the moment, developing an AI-based range of motion assessment, which he will showcase today, as well as talk about some of the other ways that he's previously done assessments and treatment via telehealth. Greg Baldwin's the director of life-ready Bosymm, which I think must be the largest telehealth physiotherapy service, delivered, I think, over 15,000 telehealth consultations, which is incredible. And Professor Kim Bennell from University of Melbourne will be presenting the results of an amazing study going on at the moment into telehealth in allied health. So really an all-star cast. It's really exciting. Bit of housekeeping before we get started. Feel free to drop any questions you have on the side there. We will be sure to answer them at the end. So I'll curate those questions towards the end. If there's any questions about CoView, I think some of the CoView team are in the call at the moment, so they might be able to answer that for you guys. If there's any technical issues, like my potentially mic being a bit strange, thanks, Cara, just let us know in the chat so we know if it's everybody or just one person. I think if you have any major issues, there should be a big refresh button at the top of Webinar Jam. Welcome, Kim. Just another note that this webinar will be recorded so that we will be able to share this at the end for anyone that couldn't make it. So just brief spiel on CoView. So as I'm sure most of you know by now, CoView is Australia's largest telehealth platform. It was founded back in CSIRO by a brilliant computer scientist named Dr. Sylvia Pfeiffer, and spun out of CSIRO back in 2016. Now, one of the most common questions we get is what's the difference between telehealth like CoView and other teleconferencing solutions like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Skype. And ultimately, there's two key differences as we see it. So the first is about encryption. So to be compliant as a telehealth platform in Australia, you need to have what's called end-to-end encryption, which just means that only the communicating users can see that data. The other key difference is about workflows, like the clinical workflows. So video calling can be quite simple, but delivering care, as we'll see today, can be a bit more complex. So for all these different stakeholders with different needs. So for example, you have these clinicians have certain needs which are different to the admin staff, which are different to the patients. So for the clinicians, we have a whole bunch of clinical tools built into CoView. So that includes some basic tools in the call, like whiteboards and screen sharing and payments, as well as add-ons, which we'll talk a bit about today, which is AI-based tools, clinical assessments, video sharing, etc. Now, for the admin staff, there's a whole bunch of features such as software integrations, particularly with practice management software, which makes telehealth different. So we integrate with Galaxy, Clinico, Nucal, Clinic Cloud, etc., which just makes the workflow a bit easier. And finally, obviously, we have features in there for the patients, which namely we keep things simple and secure. So CoView works on any device, computer, tablet, iPad, and works in any browser. So Chrome, Safari, Internet, etc. So the benefit of that is that clients don't have to download anything. And it's just all I have to do is click and go. So all of this is why Covey was a platform, not really just software, and our aim is really is about digital transformation. We're interested in taking how you do things face to face and then integrating telehealth into that, as opposed to just offering video calling. So I will hand over to Karen and stop my spiel. Right,
thank you. Hello, everyone. Let's get started. So thank you so much for inviting me along. I actually met Dr. Sylvia at a telehealth conference many years ago, back when telehealth was sort of the wild, wild west, and it's been amazing to watch the so grow over that time. So thanks so much for having me here today. So look, I know that Pete and Greg are going to do an amazing job of really diving deep into the clinical side of things. So it's my job to sort of look at what happens around that and how you make a really streamlined telehealth service. Now, a lot of us have jumped into telehealth with this COVID situation, but hopefully many of you are seeing the opportunities moving forward. But the way you structure things to be efficient, the way you target them in terms of your niche may have to be fine-tuned so that you will thrive and survive past COVID. So I know I've got 15 minutes. I'm gonna jam as much information as I can into that 15 minutes, and then we'll screech the brakes on and handball to the next. So in terms of my background, I'm a musculoskeletal physiotherapist. I've been doing telehealth consultations for the last 9 years. And I guess by virtue of being one of the first crazy people into the space, I've had some wonderful opportunities come my way, and I've worked with the WCPT and IMTRA in developing guidelines for telehealth practice around the world. And when COVID hit, I was really privileged to work with a number of the allied health organisations across Australia to help get great quality telehealth information out to health professionals all around the country as quickly as possible. But really that's sort of the boring paperwork side of things. I guess the real coalface side of things is what's more interesting. And I feel that in my physio career, telehealth has kept finding me. I'm a city girl born and bred, but I moved to the country for my first job. And that was my first crash course in how things are different in a rural and remote area. I then travelled around Australia, landed in Darwin in the far north of Australia, and I worked in an amazing sports medicine practice there, but I soon realised that people could be travelling anywhere from 6 hours to get to us just to have their physio appointment. So I was already starting to build more considerations. But my true telehealth journey started when my soon-to-be husband moved to East Timor for his work. This is a little dot of a country off the coast of Indonesia, very much a developing nation at the time. And I opened East Timor's first ever physio practice to keep me busy while I was there. And our clients were the thousands of expats living and working there, from diplomats to the UN to federal police, people working with charities. And after 3 years there, it was time to move home to Australia, but I felt a huge duty of care to these people, and I wanted a way to be able to continue to look after them. And I hatched a plan that I felt I could do this online. And so my telehealth journey was born. And over time, I've sort of worked in a number of different settings now with telehealth, the latest of which I'm now currently in Hangzhou in China. And I'm working with, there's a Cirque du Soleil show here that is a resident show partnered with Cirque du Soleil. It's an acrobatic show with 50 performing artists. I was brought in to help lead the performance medicine team in terms of connecting up health professionals and specialists in China. But when COVID hit, I was evacuated to Australia. And once they started up operations and I wasn't able to get back, I was then running a performance medicine department purely via telehealth from Australia for a number of months until I arrived back here. So it's a crazy journey, but lots of experiences there. Shifting back to all of you guys though, as you shift into a more sustainable model of telehealth from what you've maybe rapidly transitioned to through this COVID period, or for people who've been doing telehealth but want to really hone their service and make it more busy and streamlined, these are just a dot point of a few of the questions I think you really need to answer first. First of all, what is the problem you are solving? Initially, for some of you, it was to save people from heading out into the world and catching COVID. But as we move forward from COVID, Melbourneites, I see you, you'll get there. we need to find out what is that niche, what is that problem we're solving, because that's what will make people come through your door, your virtual door. So what is your telehealth niche and who is your target audience? It can be very easy to fall into the trap of thinking we now offer telehealth. That just means everything can be done via video. But sometimes the uptake is poor if that's the case, because you're not clear on who that service is appropriate for. Telehealth is a great way to tap into a specialty that you may have. Maybe it's a particular type of patient. Now that you may have an increased reach, because geography is no longer an issue, maybe you can tap into more of the patient type that you love to treat. So really have a think about that, because that will then dictate your marketing, which will then dictate whether you get those people through your door or not. Then think about, will teleconsultation for your targeting? So it's all good and well to know who you want to target, but on their end, is it something that's going to work for them? Or what do you need to put in place to make sure it's easy and accessible for them? The next one, can they afford to pay for the consultation? Not all services, of course, are pay up front. Some of them have funding models. Fortunately, we have more funding available since COVID. So it's really important to think about how that will all be funded. Will your telehealth be competing with a face-to-face service? This is what a lot of us will face moving forward, because given the choice between the two, people will often gravitate to what they know. So what are you offering? What are you changing? What's different about the fact that you're offering it online that will compel people to go that way? Who will do the health consultations? If it's been you, will that continue to be the case, or do you need to inspire a team around you? There often needs to be a real benefit to the therapist to be motivated to push through some of the challenges that tech can provide. And finally, how will your services be marketed or promoted? Again, post this telehealth period, how are people going to hear about you, and how are you different to other telehealth services that will be popping up? And so this is a really good way to look at your niche moving forward. How can you really streamline in and reach out and grab the people that you want to be seeing? And this is what I put together. I think this really sums up how to find your niche. Obviously, where are your skills and your passions? Where is the problem that the patients are having that you can solve for them with telehealth? And what is your solution, technology-wise, pricing-wise, that can do that? I think if you can intersect those all, that's a recipe for a successful telehealth service. Now, we're getting into the heavy stuff in the middle here now, and people always have questions around security and safety with telehealth. So I'm going to smash through a few of these considerations. I suppose a little sort of overriding sort of theme is that a lot of it's similar to our in-person space. We just need to make a few extra considerations. So data security, of course, it applies online in our in-person clinic as well as online. So video calls is obviously new. That's not something we do in our bricks and mortar clinic. So we need to make sure that the video platform we use is secure and suitable. And that's some of the things that Pete talked about at the start. Considerations for video files, you need to do some decision making around whether, with the permission of the client or patient, there are aspects of the call that are recorded. If so, digital files can be quite large, and you might have to consider where to store those that meets with the security principles of the country that you're in. And also, by the time we're collecting digital files for people, it may be, I sometimes get people to send images of their finger on the site of the pain, or videos of themselves doing their exercises so I can check them. So once these digital files have made it to your practice management software, you need to make sure that you're deleting that digital file trail. Are they saved to your desktop? Are they in your downloads folder? Just make sure that you're removing that trail once they're securely stored. Data security, moving on, we're talking about our actual gadgets. We're using all of our gadgets more and more, and not just our laptops. So, our phones can be accessed with a fingerprint these days. Who has that fingerprint programmed into your phone? Can that track in through to log into your practice management software? So just be aware of that. Any cloud-based softwares, make sure that there's only access via passwords for the people that should have that access. If you're sending attachments in emails, for example, if you're sending a PDF, it's very easy to put a password on that document so that only the person who knows that password can open that document. So that's another consideration. And passwords, aren't they a thing? I suggest getting a professional and secure password manager so that you can clearly manage who has access to what passwords for what softwares that you use, if you're not able to set up individual user access for everyone. In terms of indemnity insurance, look, you just need to make sure that your indemnity insurance does cover you for telehealth, and if so, if that has any jurisdictional boundaries on it in terms of where you can and can't practice. But what is the same for all health professionals is our code of conduct, our professional guidelines, the recency of practice expectations, and our professional development. All those requirements are just the same when we're working in the online space. In terms of legal, it can sometimes be worth considering just a few extra things to include in your website. When we built our online practice, we got a lawyer to write up our terms and conditions of use, our terms and conditions of purchase. Now, as part of running an online service, we obviously have a lot of people emailing us their actions, and so we like to put a little phrase at the start just to let people know, you know, for legal reasons, we need to let you know that we're unable to give specific injury-related information without a thorough assessment. The advice in this email is general in nature and subject to our terms of use. By reading past this point, it's assumed you've read and acknowledged them. So the beauty of working on technology is that some of these things can be really beautifully automatically woven into the things that we do. So it's important to just have a few of those considerations. Now, when we're talking about our online consultations, we want to make sure that we're keeping our patients safe. And we do that in all our normal ways. A lot of our education and the way we instruct patients to say, go home and do exercises, we need to apply a lot of those things when we're doing an online consultation. But little things that tend to help. It helps to be able to contact your patient in two ways, if possible. So do you have a phone number plus also an email address? Because when there are technical difficulties, sometimes one may work or they may not respond to one or the other. If it's appropriate, depending on your patient or client type, you may want to have a next of kin listed so that you have someone further to reach out to. When you're on the call, it can help at the start to just confirm so you're aware if there's anyone else in the room. Obviously, we can only see where the video is facing, and if it's appropriate to then, you know, get consent not only from the patient themselves, but from the others present as well. If a support person is advised for the call, are they available? And that may be to assist someone with the technology use. It may be to assist them with their movements or their balance. And this could be a family member. It could also be a carer. It's important, depending on your population type, to know the geographical location of the patient during the consultation. Because of the nature of technology, they could give you their home address, but it's worth double checking, is that where they'll actually be having their consultation? Just again, another safety layer. Depending where your area is that you're doing telehealth calls to, are you aware of what the emergency services are like in that area? And also, finally, just taking the time to instruct the patient about their physical environment. So if they're going to be moving around, just making sure that they have a clear space, that there's nothing on the ground, no bits of Lego that might, you know, wedge into their soul and cause them to keel over in pain. Another few things that we can layer into our process, we have some forms that people go through for some subjective questions first. And we just want to make sure that they know that they're in control and that they can choose what to do and not to do. So little things like, just remember that you're in control of this assessment. If they perform any movements, that they have the ability to stop, discontinue, and let us know. And, you know, these can even be quite injury specific. So if we're assessing anyone with a calf injury, we do just want to make sure that they have that appropriate DVT warning so that they know to head off and seek medical care if it's red hot and swollen. So for your specialty niche, just have a think about what some ways you can weave in those automated disclaimers. All right, informed consent, I'll fly through this because really the principle is the same. The principles of informed consent are the same in person as they are online, but it can be a good chance to refresh this and just check that we're doing all the right things. Each time you're going into an assessment and course of treatment, it's important that that patient is aware of what's going to be done, what the likely advantages are, what any challenges could be with that treatment, and what to expect. Also, an expectation of the financial cost. So And it's important too that they have the opportunity to ask any questions about this process. So this can be done at the start of the video call, for example. Mindful of time, so I'm just going to fly through a few of these. In terms of keeping your records, again, the same requirements as in person, but a few additional things it's worth remembering. It's important in your notes to identify that the consult was via telehealth, what platform was used, and any tech issues that you experienced. There's a lot of sort of pros and cons to the recording of video consultations. That's something that you have to think about and work out for yourself and your health profession, your specialty, and your way of working. All right. Now, a few little tips for video setup is just making sure that your camera is stable and not handheld. I think we're all across that now. One thing that I do see a lot of the laptop camera being down low on the desk. We want as natural an experience as possible, so let's have that camera up at eye level and make sure that although you can look at their face, obviously that's important, also spend some time looking at the camera. That will feel like you're really looking into the person's eyes. Make sure there's good lighting on your face, a nice professional background, and a quiet environment. So this is just showing on the desktop. I've got my webcam on there, which makes a big difference. Actually, I can show you that difference. So I used to use the built-in camera on my computer. When I got the webcam, this is the difference that you can see, exactly the same conditions, but it just pulls in a lot more light and the resolution is a lot better. So we think of video call being a lot about the internet connection, but sometimes some simple gadgets can make that quality of experience a lot better. All right, I think that will do for us. My final tips would be just to making sure that you get your appointments and time zones right if you're working with people across different time zones. And always when I jump on a call, I make sure that I have a good backup for my internet. I've got Wi-Fi and 4G. I've got my laptop, iPad, and phone all ready to go. I've got, you know, a video platform that I can use, maybe a backup one if there's issues. And at the end of the day, anything I need in terms of education and props is a short reach away. So there's a lot there. I hope that that's given you some useful little nuggets in there, but I'm going to bow out of the way and give some space for these other wonderful people to share their gold as well. So thank you all.
Thanks, Karen. Over to you, Peter.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Pretty excited to be on a pretty cool panel. Karen's obviously the trailblazer in the space and following a lot of Prof. Burnell's work in the space of OA and really interested to see a lot of the results from her trials coming up. And I've heard a lot of good stuff that Greg has done in Bosymm, obviously, both being in Perth, you know, certainly aware of all the cool stuff he's doing in the space. But today, so I've been asked to sort of go through, I'm going to demonstrate one of Covi's new novel applications, and I'm not sure if it's commercially available yet. Pete, you might be able to confirm or deny, but effectively it's PhysioRom. A lot of you might have seen it promoted amongst social media, the internet, even at conferences as well. I'm not sure if it's commercially available yet because we are engaged in a lot of research in looking at the validity of the application, and more or less what it does is it's the ability to measure range of movement and mobility via telehealth with a simple click of the button. So I'll explain more about that in just a moment, but what I thought I'd also do is to sort of showcase some other tools that one might use when going about a subjective assessment and also an objective assessment as well, which obviously would include measuring range of movement using PhysioRom. So before I do that, my background, just so I don't give the impression that I'm into machine learning or AI, because I'm definitely not. I don't know much about that tech. All I do is we work out and we run the validity through clinical research to see whether it's PhysioRom in particular is actually telling us what we think it is. So my background, I split my time 50-50 in academia, in teaching and research, over here in Perth between UWA and Curtin Uni. And then the other 50% of my time I spend in clinical practice as an exercise physiologist at a small little clinic in Oxford Street in Mount Hawthorn, where a lot of my time is, obviously seeing patients face to face, but also over telehealth as well. So look, what I might just dive in, and Pete, are you good to go on CoView? Awesome. So I'm just going to get this up, and it'd be really cool if everyone can let me know whether you can see the screen. Yep. Cool. So if you can see my screen there, you can see there's me up the top, obviously, and Pete down below. And so I'm not going to go through all the sort of things you need to consider, the checklist, because Karen's done a really cool job in conveying that already. So Pete's obviously logged on to the platform, and for those who already use CoView, you know how seamless it is and how easy it is. Pete's done run a bit of a spiel around the differences between CoView and Zoom and the like before. So I won't go into that, but what I will do, I'll dive straight into a clinical assessment, and like any clinical assessment, it should be started with more a subjective assessment. And one way we can do that is by uploading forms. So in some instances, you might, as a clinician, you're at your own practice, you might have your own subjective clinical assessment sheet where, if you're doing a live consult, you can go through the patient in real time, checking through, patient history, injury history, goals, lifestyle factors, any other pertinent things you might want to know prior to doing a consult. I prefer to do that asynchronously. So Karen mentioned before that she signs the consent form. You can utilize forms to actually have the patient do that prior to a consult. And I find that works really well because it opens up a lot more time to go through more objective means and to actually talk with the client to ascertain a bit more information and dive in a bit deeper based on what they may have flagged offline. So I've uploaded a very basic PROM scale in case we did want to do it live. The LEFS, most of you may or may not, well, most of you hopefully will be familiar with that. It's a very standardized measure, well used, good validity. And I like using this type of form to go through with the client to have them fill out the different items in real time. In case they do select a specific item, which allows me then to dive in and explore a little bit deeper. So Pete at the top, if you can click on your little bar there, yep, you'll see me. I'm the blue and Pete is the orange. So I'll ask Pete just to fill out the form in real time, starting from the top and working his way down. So you can see there, Pete's got he can walk between rooms quite well. Having a bit of trouble with squatting, that's not good, Pete. And you get the picture. So it's a really good way. It's very interactive. And from my experience using this with patients, they seem to enjoy it. Very interacting, very engaging, and really, really good. To touch on a point that Karen made, again, being cognizant of your digital footprint, CoView does have the function to download these forms. It's important to know that you should download it and store it in a secure file storage platform or your PMS to make sure it's secured. It's stored securely, and then to delete, in your downloads file to again make sure you erase that digital footprint just to comply with a lot of those security and data privacy sort of standards. Hey Pete, how you going? Cool. So that's the one way we use the LEFS. You can use that with any other sort of patient-reported outcome tools as well. But what I will do now, I'll go straight into PhysioROM. And like I mentioned, PhysioROM is the ability to actually measure range of movement in real time, so over telehealth. And what I will do, I'll touch on a bit of history about how this came about. And I hope I get this right. The way that I understand it is that Sylvia Pfeiffer, who's the CEO and founder of CoView, she went to a health hackathon, I think it was in 2017, and which for those of you who are familiar with these sort of hackathons is that you get a whole bunch of tech guys, engineers and the like, who basically congregate and they work together amongst each other to solve problems put to them by industry and others such as Sylvia. And Sylvia put forward this problem to see if it could work. To say, look, can we measure joint range of motion over my telehealth platform? So 3 guys got together. They formed a little startup called Form, and they came up with a solution, which was PhysioROM. And what that led to down the track was that Sylvia and Gibbon were using CodeView quite frequently, and we did have an experience in clinical research. It was put forth to us to see what we thought of it and whether we could do some research with it. And that led to us securing a pretty decent size of grant funds from a Cooperative Research Council project grant, which is pretty much comprised of 2 parts. Firstly, we want to investigate the validity and the accuracy of PhysioROM to really see whether, what these numbers and whether the AI machine learning algorithm and the application itself is actually giving us accurate range of motion values. So the way we're doing that is we're taking the digital footage and recordings of specific movements. So think knee flexion extension seated, knee flexion extension reclined or supine, shoulder abduction, flexion, hip flexion, abduction as well. We're recording these bits of footage, and then we're running it through, we're measuring it through motion capture, 3D motion capture through Vicon. So all of our participants are kitted up with little reflective markers on each of their joint axes, and we're comparing the movements between 3D motion capture with Vicon, so in a big biomechanics lab, versus what PhysioROM does via telehealth. And we're getting some really interesting results. We've just completed the study. We're finding that, and by and large, and it is subsequent to further analysis, but we're finding that PhysioROM in specific movements, and the specific movements being knee flexion extension, both reclined and seated, are falling within the levels of error between what you would normally expect with goniometry, which is around sort of 2 to 4, depending on what you read. So that's a really good outcome, which sort of showcases and represents its clinical utility when we're using it with patients. But enough of that. What I thought I would do is to, consistent with giving you all a virtual experience, I'm going to show you how it's done. So we're going to be measuring Pete, who's kindly agreed to look at his shoulder range of movement. I know I've just gone through a lower limb functional scale, but given just looking at Pete's space there, I think it might be better to look at his upper limb. So what I might ask Pete to do is if Pete could stand up and just move about 5 to 6 steps back away from his camera.
Also, I'm glad we're doing this because last time we tried it doing a squat, it was really embarrassing. I was
Cool. So Pete's going to take a few steps back. Now, when we're using PhysioROM, it's important that we get the whole body. So basically, to give you a bit of an understanding of how it works, is the machine learning basically picks up every single joint axis from ankle, knee, hip, shoulder, pelvis, etc. The xiphoid process, and everything like that, and then they work together to form a rough idea of joint range. So Pete, if you can stand up for me, mate. So again, we want to be measuring Pete, or other Pete, not me. If you're going to stand with your hands down by your side, that'd be good, facing directly in line with the camera. Okay, and then in this case, so we get to choose what joint we're going to assess. In this case, we're going to look at his right shoulder. Click on right shoulder. Now, before we go through this, I should caveat this by saying that this is the first iteration of PhysioROM, and part of the study we're doing is to basically, obviously, look at the accuracy of it, but also for Form and the team to basically build a better model of it. So this is the first iteration. Part of this whole webinar is also to get your guys' opinions around how we can improve the user experience of it as well. So more than happy to hear suggestions as well. Anyway, I digress. Right shoulder, continue. And then what we're going to do here, we're going to preface Pete by saying stand up straight, hands down by the side. And then what I want you to do, Pete, is to move your shoulder up to the side as high as you can 5 times on when I say go. So ready, set, go. Shoulder, with the shoulder up to the side, Pete. Yeah, there you go, as high as you can. A bit slower there. There you go, a couple more times. Okay, and stop. We'll click finish. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to analyze, and it takes a little while to process, and you'll see what it actually does for those of you who have seen it before, it's pretty cool. And then we'll just wait a bit until we can go through and actually see what it looks like. But I should also mention while we're waiting is that the second part of our study is to also look at the clinical utility and the implementation of Physio-ROM in clinical practice. So part of that, those monies that were received for research was to also look at how we could use Physio-ROM in a knee replacement cohort. So we're currently doing a pretty large randomized control trial looking at a telehealth delivered intervention for people undergoing total knee replacement acutely versus a typical clinical program as well. So we're looking at to see what differences are with telehealth, but we're also looking at Physio-ROM and its effectiveness, or again, its utility in and how you would normally use it in clinical practice. So you can see there, Pete's just gone through it. Oh, it's already played. So you can see there, it goes through, we're looking at the shoulder. Again, you can see the axis there, it's measuring purely shoulder abduction. Now, this was the first iteration of Physio-ROM, so you'll see there, it's coming up with some numbers which aren't consistent. This is measuring range of motion, not in a clinical way, but more in a biomechanical way. And part of the version 2 of Physio-ROM is to basically switch that over to more of a clinical-based projection of what you would expect to find and measure clinically as well. So that's how we would do it. Again, you'll click on the report, and if you can see my, I'm not sure if you can see my, you can't see my, it's on a different slide anyway. But you can click on the report, and what that pretty much breaks it down into is it looks at peak values of, in this case, shoulder abduction, and it looks at a general, full range of motion as well, what were the peak values and what were the average range of motion values as well. And part of the work that we're doing now with Thorm and the CoView team is to more or less have them provide more clinically meaningful data rather than a really complicated data set, which is part of the reason why I'm not sure it's commercially available just yet. But it's close. We've got the data there. We know it works well, and hopefully it's ready to go once a few other things have been ironed out. But I'm not sure where it's currently at. Hopefully it's soon. Probably something to touch base with Sylvia or the team about. So that's Physio-ROM. I'm not sure how much time I've got. Pete, just stop me if I'm running out of time. What I might do, given we've got a couple more minutes now, if we're going to do, so we've gone through subjective through a well-validated functional test, a well-validated patient-reported outcome measure. We've gone through Physio-ROM, which is certainly currently novel. Another one we can do is also more of an objective functional test where we can look at general biomechanics and I guess sort of movement postures. So in this case, one that I use quite frequently, my bias is knee OA and an ACL, so I use this one a lot, which is a single leg squat test. So Pete, what I'm going to get you to do is to stand up again. We're going to move from the shoulder back down to the knee.
It's just a bad one.
Sorry?
Go, yep.
Okay, so what we're going to do, again, is a single leg squat test, and what we're doing here, the patient can see exactly what we're doing. It's a form I've uploaded to make sure that I can, again, score the quality of Pete's single leg squat, which I'm sure will be flawless. So what we're going to do, so Pete, if I can get you to, we'll start with your, let's say your left knee. So I want you to bend your right knee and have it at 90 degrees behind you. Okay, now your mic is right in the middle of your knee. I won't get you to move, but anyway, in future, when you're doing a clinical consult, make sure that the patient doesn't have a massive mic out the way. There you go. Okay, and then Pete, what I'm going to get you to do now is just to squat down as far as you can go comfortably, and then repeat that 5 times. This is not fair. All right, and then what I'm doing here is that I'm looking at the quality of Pete's single leg squat. So Pete, you're doing really well, mate. You passed with flying colours. So he would get a 5 out of 5, let's say. And then you would repeat the test on the other side, again, obviously to compare the injured or pathological side with the good or control leg. Just one of many tests you can do, and I'm sure I'm eager to hear Greg's experience, to hear what he does with these sort of tests, but you can do all sorts of things. So that's really it for me. Again, just to give you a bit of an idea of how you can do a lot of clinical assessments on CoView, to show you a bit of Physio-ROM and obviously the exciting nature of where digital health is going. This is obviously, like I've mentioned, this is the first iteration. We see going forward that we think that it could lead into really good gait analysis going forward, but that would obviously mean a lot more refining of the current algorithm, which hopefully the guys at Thorm and Covey can achieve. I guess any questions we'll leave to the end, but yeah, I'll hand it over back to you, Pete. Thank you for being the model as well. You did a great job.
I should have practiced my leg squats. Thanks so much, Pete. And just over to you, Greg.
No worries, thank you. I'm just going to make sure and see if this will work. We've just had a bit of technical stuff going on in the background, but hopefully that's come up. Yeah, I guess a good example of technology and how we use it these days. I'm calling in from Kalbarri. We're actually on holiday, so I'm calling in from my caravan up here. We're also getting used to being able to dial in from here, there, and everywhere these days with what we've gone through this year with COVID. So I just thought I'd start with, I guess, giving you a bit of a background on us, so our experience, I guess our process that we went through in finding the right software, and then spend a fair bit of time talking about patient experience, because I think that clinically we go through how we're going to be as physios, but we probably don't think enough about the patient experience side. So I wanted to spend a bit more time on that. And then obviously sort of reiterating some of the challenges of borders and probably our experience in that regard, a bit like what Karen was discussing earlier. So from our end, I guess we're a business-to-business type company. We do a lot of on-site physio, and I guess that's where our entry into telehealth sort of came from, that idea that getting in front of people early on after an injury can make a significant difference. And I guess we were exposed initially to telehealth a number of years ago, and then started really looking at it more solidly about 5 years ago. What we've done, I guess, over that time and in that sort of business-to-business model is that we've been able to learn alongside the businesses we've been working with, and we've managed now more than 15,000 cases. We're able to sort of look at a couple of different models, I guess, ones which are telehealth only, ones which are a mixture of the telehealth and hands-on, and obviously compare it to our hands-on only scenarios, and I guess particularly a lot more of that this year, and something that we've been not surprised at, but certainly great to sort of see the data on, is that our outcomes are very similar, whether we're using video health or hands-on type models. And obviously with that comes a lot, I guess, less cost per outcome, and I guess we probably measure outcomes in a business-to-business model more than a clinical one, but certainly understanding that it can be more cost-effective to use video than to try to get there in person. When we started on this journey, we really had a question of trying to find the right partner to be able to use, and I can't stress that enough, that you really do need to try to look into the type of software that you're going to use, and is it going to be appropriate. Big thing for us was what their support looked like. The first group partnered with didn't really have a lot of back-end support and couldn't problem solve issues for us. So you do need to look at that, and I guess looking at their history, but I guess at that time, 5 years ago, we didn't have a lot of businesses that had a lot of history, so we had to take a bit of a punt on Sylvia and her team, but they certainly came through with the goods for us. The reliability issue is definitely something to sort of think of, but for sure that security and understanding the security landscape worldwide, not just sort of locally, and how that might fit in. I think that experience and particularly that ability to troubleshoot, software will get updated. Apple update their devices, Android do as well. If you pick a partner that's not going to be able to stay on top of that, then all you're going to have is problems with connecting as soon as that does happen. And then everyone gets pretty stressed out, and particularly if it's the first time that someone's experienced it, if they've got a bad experience because of that, and you're dealing with a partner that might take weeks to be able to navigate that problem, then it's a bad outcome for everyone. So I think definitely making sure, and if you're talking to people about what type of software you're going to use, ask them what happens when an update does occur, and how long their turnaround is to try to find a patch or a fix, because that makes a big difference to your business, and ultimately that's what you need to protect. And obviously the integration with existing products. We all love to use a bit of technology, but it needs to be something that's able to be used easily. And it's one thing to sit there and go, I would really find this, very interesting, but I can tell you what, particularly for us, when we look at I guess our 60 physios and our over 200 that we've got within the Life Ready team as well, if I'm sort of saying that this is just a good idea, but it's going to be very difficult to use and you have to use it just by itself and it doesn't talk to anything else that we're already using, then the novelty of that wears off pretty quickly. So really look at how the software that you're going to use integrates with whatever you're already using. And if it doesn't, try to ask the provider that you're talking to whether they can. Again, it will give you a good idea as to whether they've got things like an API in the background that makes it easy, because as you scale, you do want whatever software you're going to be using to scale with you. As I said, one thing that I did want to talk about was that importance of the customer journey, and we spent a fair bit of time, and certainly, about a year ago, we merged with a group called Life Ready, which is a lot of clinics, and when COVID hit, we had to very quickly try to sort of prove to their market that we knew what we were doing in this video health space. So I'm just going to play a really quick video that we put together on the fly to prove a little bit of that understanding, and then talk a bit more about that afterwards. And I've just got to make sure that this is going to work. It should take 2 seconds. All right, let's see.
At Life Ready, we understand that not all patients will be able to attend our clinics, and some may prefer to have their consult completed from the comfort of their own home. We believe high-quality physiotherapy care should be available to all, which is why we're proud to continue delivering our video health platform. Using our video health platform, our physios are still able to provide the same high level of care to you as they would if you were in the clinic. They're able to assess, treat, and manage your condition with advice, education, self-management strategies, and exercise prescription. We have delivered over 12,000 video health consults Australia-wide, so you know you're in good hands with physios who are experienced in delivering physiotherapy this way. Booking your video health appointment is very simple. Contact your nearest Life Ready clinic on the link below. All you'll need is access to the internet and to a device that has a camera. Our friendly team will send you a link that you can click on, which will take you to your virtual waiting room. And from here, your physio will meet you and your consult will begin. If you're interested and would like to book an appointment, please contact us here.
So we spent time, on that. It took us a couple of hours to try to put together, and then we spent a bit of money on trying to get some help with the actual development of it. But it made a big difference, I guess, to patients sort of feeling like we knew what we were doing. I think it's sort of money, definitely money well spent if it's something that you're going to be putting some time into, is to make sure that customers feel like you know what you're doing. Then I guess as part of the customer journey, we also have, I guess, a team of our admin team in particular that we call our Concierge team, and they're designed to make sure that the journey really matches what you would have experienced if you're going into a practice. So they will greet a patient as they come into the telehealth consult. If they're a little late in calling, or even a few minutes before, we'll give them a call and we'll make sure and talk them through how to connect. A big part of that is just to take the stress out of it, particularly the first time around. If someone hasn't done it before, it can be really stressful for them. It's something new. So by having our team there to both sort of walk them through, but then also to greet them as they come into the room, for us is really important. And we spend a fair bit of time and effort trying to make sure that experience is much the same. It also helps for the physio team too. They can get quite stressed, particularly when they're using a technology that they're not familiar with. So by having our admin team there to support them, make sure that the patient is there, then obviously once the patient's there and settled, then the physio can come into the room and take the consult from there. Just makes the journey, very much similar to what you would have in a practice. It is a little bit more in terms of upfront costs, but it does make things more efficient. And as you sort of scale up, that efficiency is really important, because time spent with your physio team trying to work on connection issues, trying to make sure that the patient's there and ready for them, if you're busy, is much more expensive, obviously, than using your admin team to be able to do it. So our concierge service is a core part of the way that we deliver things, and we think adds a lot to the experience that we have with patients that are through that whole journey. Challenging of borders, I think, and Karen, you sort of talked about this before, making sure you understand your time zones. If someone's going to book in, they can book in from anywhere for a telehealth consult, and making sure that is the case. We've worked on making sure that if someone is booking in, that our software system automatically adjusts the time zones appropriately. Obviously, being aware of legislation, things have gotten a lot easier from a legislative perspective, but certainly making sure that you're aware of what the legislation is and what you can and can't do, and just reiterating to make sure that you are insured to do consults via telehealth. We do consults into New Zealand from Australia, and so our team are registered to treat into New Zealand as well, because if we're going to be treating someone who resides in New Zealand, then we also need to be covered to work in that area. So there's an additional cost to us, but it's a part of the way that we work. I guess understanding that if we've got an expat, I guess, or an Australian resident that's overseas, we're more than capable of consulting them anywhere, and we've done some of those into Europe, into New York, particularly in more sort of recent times. But making sure that you are insured to be able to do that consult is important. And then the security, obviously, of where you're going. The security rules in Australia are different to what they are into the US, which are different into the EU as well. So just being mindful of those things. And finally, just sort of where to next. I think what this year has sort of proven to us all is that technology is going to be a big part of our future. I only have to look at Pete's physio-ROM stuff, which is super exciting. Obviously, the use of telehealth and how it's going to be normal, and I think it's going to be much more part of our journey forwards. But what else is there going to be, and sort of keep our minds open to what will be next too. Thanks for your time.
So much, Greg. So just whilst Kim gets her slides up, I'll point out two quick things. So what you saw with Greg's, with the Declan app is an example of using CoView, I think, clinic plan, where you can white label it and modify it to look like, to match your own branding. So there's lots of features in CoView to make it fit in with your existing practice or existing website, which is great. To answer, to address Pete's points about where PhysioROM is at. So it's not an add-on you can use just because it's not validated yet, but we're happy to install it if anyone wants access. So on the condition that they give us feedback, and we can ask them about what they want to hear in it. So I want to see that. So I'll just post a link in the chat in case anyone's interested. Just give us your details, and we can install PhysioROM in your account, or just jump on CoView's live chat and just let us know. I'm more than happy to give it to anyone who wants it, as long as you know it's not validated yet. All right, over to Kim. Kim, we can see your slides, but we can neither hear you nor see you.
You hear me now?
Yep, I hear you now.
Right, and you can see the slides?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, hello everybody, and thanks for hanging around till this last talk. And essentially, I'm just going to give the preliminary results of a couple of surveys that we have been doing in conjunction with different organisations to really try and help with lobbying in the future, now and in the future, for telehealth to continue. We all know that there's been extra funding that's been available because of COVID, which has really sped up the process, but these have been temporary, these funding arrangements, and we want those to continue. And the health insurers and the government are really interested in any evidence to help support the continuation or not of these item numbers and funding. So one of the studies that we've done with the people that are listed on here, different partners, was done with funding from the APA and the Physiotherapy Research Foundation. And then we've done another study with the Allied Health Professions Australia, as well as one with the NDIS. So I'm just really going to briefly present some of the preliminary results of those. So the two surveys, well, first, the two of the surveys. One, as I said, is done with the APA. They're both, or all of them, are online surveys of both clinicians and patients, these two. And we're looking at the experiences of both physios and patients with video conferencing only with the physio study. And in hindsight, we probably should have added in telephone, but this was the first study that we started up when COVID started, and we didn't realise as many physios would be also doing consults by telephone. So in that one, we're doing it by just looking at video conferencing, and we're up to nearly 400 patients and nearly 200 physios in that survey, and it's still ongoing. And at the end, I'll ask for some help with getting over 400 and over 200 for the physios. The second survey that we did, we included questions around both video conferencing and telephone. And this was with funding from Allied Health Professions Australia, plus the different disciplines. So the different disciplines that we also included were diabetes educators, occupational therapists, podiatrists, osteopaths, speech therapists, and exercise physiologists. And we didn't do physios in this one, obviously, because we've done that with the APA. And then the third survey that has been finished now, that I won't present the results on, but obviously providing us with some great results, is we've worked in partnership with the NDIS to look at, this time, just the survey of the recipients of the NDIS or their carers, not the clinicians, but looking at their experiences with receiving services from the NDIS, including allied health services, and the changes that the NDIS had put into place during COVID, to see what people thought about that. And we had nearly 2,500 recipients or their carers responded to that. And you can see that we've got large numbers who have been to see physios during the pandemic via telehealth, exercise physiologists, OTs with the most that they've seen, but a whole range. And that we're just writing up the report at the moment for that. And the NDIS has really been using that to help inform where they go and their funding in the future. So with the survey, just a little bit around, this is for the physio survey. You can see there that most of the people that responded, the physios, were in private practice. And this really reflected the fact that because of ethics that we had to get, we didn't get ethics through hospitals, which is very time consuming, and we really didn't have time to do that. And so we weren't able to get information about telehealth services through the sort of public and private hospitals. So most of the physios that answered the survey came from private practice. You can see that prior training in telehealth delivery, basically 86% had no private prior training. Some had a little bit of training. And you can see that the type of video conferencing service, most of them were doing one-on-one consults, but still some people were also doing group classes or one-on-one as well. So there were some group classes as well being conducted via video conferencing. We haven't, the actual information that the physios provided about their experiences, we're not collecting until November, when they've all completed their services. So we don't have that at the moment. In terms of the patients that completed the survey, you can see that the majority are women, and that also tended to be what we also found for the other surveys. So either reflects that more women are having telehealth consults, but probably more reflects the fact that women are more likely to take part in research. You can see again the majority have come from Victoria, and that's again probably not surprising because of our extended lockdown. And you can see that 75% of participants were from a major city, with 25% from regional remote areas. The average age of the patients was 51.6 years, but obviously a bit of a spread there. And how long had they had the problem that they were seeking treatment for? And more than half had had the problem for more than 12 months. And then smaller numbers were more acute problems, so 10% had it for less than 6 weeks. But you can see that really it seems to have been more people who have had chronic problems. In terms of the reasons that the patients were seeking treatment for, a whole range of different reasons, pain, function, but there's others are here. We've got bladder and bowel, so a lot of women's health physios, some of their patients had filled it in as well, so they were getting treatment for their continence, and a whole range of other things, rehab following surgery and so forth. And I think this is important because a lot of the health insurers were asking us, who's it suitable for? Which patients should be having it? Which ones shouldn't we be funding it for? And which should we be funding it for? And we said, look, it's not like that there's one condition that's in and then one condition that's out, because it's a whole range of factors that are going to play into whether or not that patient is suitable for telehealth delivery. And it's not just the condition, you know, that someone can have the same condition, but their other comorbidities or their technological skills, a whole range of things are going to help determine whether or not this is the way to go. You can see here, again, this is interesting because a lot of the health insurers were very worried that if they open up funding telehealth, it's going to be, you know, let a floodgate, and they're going to be their costs are going to elevate because everybody's going to be having telehealth and it's going to push their costs up. But you can see here that the average number of one-on-one consults, and this is after the person has finished their treatment for that particular problem or that episode of treatment, and you can see that the average number of consults is only sort of 3.3. So people aren't having hundreds and hundreds of consults now just because they're via video conferencing. And again, you can see here that most of the people, 73%, had been seeing the physio for the same problem and then sort of switched over to telehealth, which probably reflects that that's what happened with COVID when it came in, that they were seeing the physio and then they switched over. But obviously, 27% had seen the physio for a new problem and all via telehealth. And you can see that really only 7% of people had ever had video conferencing consults with a physio prior to this. So it wasn't something that they were all familiar with, but 33% had seen another health professional prior to this with video conferencing consults. And perhaps that's a GP or some other health clinician. What did they value about physio via one-on-one via video conferencing? A whole range of different factors, but by and large, they really valued the convenience, 87%, but they also valued the access, the less waiting time, undivided attention of the physio, the treatment effectiveness, privacy, cost savings, and then other factors. Again, you know, when you look at it, patients obviously do value it because 44% of it was 44% paid for it themselves, all of it for themselves. So they were still happy to pay for their consults, even if they're still happy to have the consults, even if they were paying for it themselves. And then obviously others were paying part of it. And who else paid? You can just see some information there about who else paid for it. This is just the results from the Allied Health Professions Australia. So all those other health professions, I just thought out of interest to see what they were doing. Again, you can see that people were receiving it via telephone as well, but by and large, video conferencing was the most common, and then some by group. And again, you can see that the gender of the patients here, female being again the most common, with an average age of 40, so a little bit younger in this. And just this question for these, how would you rate your overall experience with telehealth? And this is with all of those other professions combined, not with the physios, but the other professions. And 87% said that they'd had a positive experience with telehealth, and 55% said it was a very positive experience. And in terms of negative, only 6% rated it as being a negative experience. So that's really pretty good. Now, I just combined all of the survey results from the different groups and from the different surveys. And this really just shows the answers to certain questions and the percentage in the different categories. So this was the question around, you know, what was your expectation of treatment via video conferencing before you had it? And you can see that for physios, that 24% or so said it greatly exceeded their expectations. And then you can see that there's a proportion that said it somewhat exceeded. So you can see that nearly 60% said it either greatly exceeded or somewhat exceeded their expectations. And that was pretty similar across the board. Greatly exceeded expectations for osteopaths, but the numbers were pretty small, as you can see, in osteopaths and podiatry, very few numbers. And I think it reflects the fact that not as many people are seeing podiatrists via telehealth. But you can see that very few across the board were saying that it was less than they expected. How safe did you feel during the consult via video conference? And again, this was something that the health insurers that are worried about. Well, maybe it's not safe to be being delivered. And again, you can see that, again, majority of people have said that they felt very or extremely safe during the consult via video conferencing across the board. And, you know, unsafe, no one said that they felt unsafe with physio at all. How satisfied were you with your care via video conferencing? And you can see again that 71% were very or extremely satisfied with their care in physios. And then if you add on the somewhat or moderately satisfied, you can see that nearly 98% were either somewhat or very satisfied, and very few were dissatisfied at all. And you can see across the board the different professions there. How effective did you think the care was? Did I just do this one? Yes, how effective did you think the care was via video conferencing? And this again is what the patient said. Again, about 96% said it was either moderately, somewhat, or very extremely effective for their care, in terms of their care. And that is nearly the best out of all of them, except again for the very small numbers from podiatry. But you can see that we've probably got the smallest number that felt that it was neutral or not effective. So again, most people have found it very effective, which is really good. How likely would you be to use after COVID? And again, this was something that the health insurers, we've had some meetings with them and presented the results, and they were very interested in this because, again, they felt like once they offered it, then everyone would be having it and it would be opening the door. But I think, as you can see here, that not everybody, if they're given the choice, will want to have telehealth. So it comes down to choice. Some people would be very or extremely likely to use it after COVID, and others would be very or somewhat unlikely. So again, people still value it's certainly not going to replace face-to-face care, but I think what it shows is that patients should have the choice to receive their care whichever way is going to work best for them. And as I said, if you can see that in physio, about 68% were very or extremely or somewhat moderately likely to use it if it was available after COVID. And the allied health professionals, again, we asked a different question in that survey, but we asked them, what is your preferred way to have your sessions with your allied health practitioner? And you can again see 73% still said their preferred way is in person. But again, as I said, 7% wanted to, their preferred way was via the telephone, and 20% said video conferencing. So for these other allied health practitioners, people, again, there's choice. And I think that's the important message that we're trying to give to the health insurers and to the funding bodies, that that choice is important. Someone asked us about whether there was any differences in responses for metro versus regional physiotherapy patients, but we didn't see any response. They were still equally as happy and equally as satisfied and found it as effective with their care, whether they were regional, rural or metro. However, we didn't have we only had very few that would be classed remote areas. It's very hard to try and recruit patients from remote areas. Lastly, I just wanted to mention we've been doing more work. We've got Luke Davies, who's a PhD student supervised by us, and by Trevor Russell from University of Queensland. And you might have seen his Delphi survey that he's running, because what we're trying to do here is to develop a core capability framework for physios to deliver quality care via video conferencing. And so we're coming up with what are the unique capabilities that you need to deliver care via video conferencing that are over and above what you would need as a physio to deliver care in person. What are the different ones that you would need? And we think this is really important for a number of reasons, because it can be useful for curriculum development, but also useful for physiotherapists to see whether they actually have these core capabilities and help with their learning and also judging the standards of care. And we think this is also very, the health insurers are also liking this, because they want to know that physios and any other allied health professionals do have the capability to deliver care in this manner, because it is different. It's not
Kim, I think we lost your audio there. Or is that just me?
Yeah, I lost the audio too.
No, I can't hear either, Pete.
Kim's still in the room, so if we'll give her a moment. And whilst we wait for Kim to return her audio, feel free to pop any questions in the live chat. I'm sure panelists might be able to hang around for a couple more minutes. I realise we're going over. And if we don't have time to answer your questions, I'll get someone to follow up. And perhaps, Kim, if that's okay, we'll share the slides with in the follow-up email. Okay, I think we should treat that as the end of the presentation. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for joining us, everybody, and attending this webinar. I hope that was helpful. It's rare to get such a fantastic set of telehealth experts together in one room focused on a specific topic. So thank you all so much, presenters, for taking part in this panel. We haven't had any questions come through yet, but if they come a bit later, then we can follow up. But we will send through a follow-up email with links to how to access these panelists, as well as some more resources. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks, Karen, Greg, and Peter. Thanks, Kim, although I realised she just left the room. And we hope that was useful. Thank you.
So yeah, thanks, Pete, for organising.
Thanks, mate. See ya.